So welcome everyone this morning to the Staying Home, Leaving Violence Industry Briefing. This is for a request for tender number RFX 1070. What I'd like to commence with is an acknowledgement of country. So we acknowledge the Aboriginal people as the First Nations people of New South Wales and pay our respects to elders past, present and future. We acknowledge the ongoing connection with Aboriginal people have to this land and recognise Aboriginal people as the original custodians of this land. Today, there'll be myself as the transaction manager from APP that will be speaking on today. We've also got Sarah Bradfield, who's the Director of Program Delivery and Integration for this particular program. She will be giving you the overview of the scope of this tender. As I mentioned at the start in the housekeeping, you can submit questions via Procurement Central, and that will close on Monday, the 28th of October. But also you can put questions in writing through the chat function in this Teams meeting. And also this recording will be maintained and kept on our webpage. So at any point in time, you can go back and refer to this recording. In terms of the agenda today, as I said, Sarah will give you an overview of the program. Then I will run through the balance of the agenda items, which is the procurement overview, what you will see in the tender documentation and the returnable schedules, a little bit about the procurement central process, and then I'll just summarise at the back end of this briefing just to give everyone a quick snapshot of all the key items that have come out of the briefing today. But now I'd like to welcome and hand over to Sarah to give her program overview. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, Stephen, and thanks everyone for joining us today. It's really exciting for us to be able to bring you the Staying Home Leaving Violence procurement, which has been hotly awaited, I know, by a lot of you. So if we pop to the next slide. So the Staying Home Leaving Violence program is a specialised domestic and family violence program aimed at promoting victim survivors' housing stability and preventing their homelessness. The SHLV model is based on intensive casework, which is long-term, needs-based and integrated with key agencies, including New South Wales Police, Women's Domestic Violence Court Advocacy Service, or WDVCAS, Health Services, Housing New South Wales and relevant NGOs. SHLV aims to complement existing services and to operate in collaboration and coordination with existing services and to prevent the occurrence of post-separation abuse. What you see on your screen here is that we have existing services including 39 contracts across 32 service providers in 91 LGAs. So that's all the purple you can see in that map there. And we'll go on to the next slide and we'll talk a little bit about the areas that are in the yellow and the green. So this new round of Staying Home Leaving Violence procurement is seeking to secure up to 14 services to cover 28 local government areas where there is currently no service delivery or limited service delivery. This includes 10 services in the open tender and 4 services in the single invited tender. The funding profile, the total contract value of $25.9 million for over 4 years in this round is what we have funding to distribute. The remainder of the DFV emergency package will expand our integrated domestic and family violence service and our Aboriginal co-designed models. The procurement objectives for the SHLV procurement is that we wanted to open the market to new providers through competitive procurement where that made sense to do so. We wanted to expand availability to areas that were not currently available across New South Wales, so reaching that full state coverage. We wanted to deliver service expansion quickly to meet areas of demand and in recognition that this is crisis emergency package funding. We wanted to increase Aboriginal service delivery wherever we could, and we were also very keen to ensure that we were committing to the long contracts for providers, which we will be able to do. Before I move to the next slide, I'll just say that the green, if we can just go back one, Sab, thank you. If we can, the green areas are the LG, which you probably can't see on that very tiny writing, the LGAs for new services through tender process, and the yellow areas are our contract variation LGAs. We will post all of these materials on the website, so you'll be able to see them, but they're also obviously available. The information's available in the tender package online. Thanks, Sab. So the service locations and funding. As this is an emergency funding package, the design of the expansion has been modelled on getting the funding to services as quickly as possible and extending existing SHLV services in some locations and going to market for new services in others that will allow the fastest rollout for the funding in the most practical way. We considered more than the DFV rates and demand when looking at the locations, and we looked at significant supply analysis to understand the changing provider landscape. So the SHLV expansion required increasing services by LGA, and we've grouped LGAs to make the service offerings appropriate for the locations. And the locations have been identified through consultation with districts and reflecting the market analysis information. The expansion has been based on thorough mapping of gap areas as well as considering demand data and Boxar data. We recognise that rural, remote and regional areas face particular challenges in service delivery, and we've allocated funding to account for this complexity of the environment. Increasing Aboriginal-led DFV service delivery is important in all our programs, and where we've been able to identify Aboriginal providers with experience and capacity in domestic and family violence delivery, we're offering single invited tenders for these locations. Next slide. So the open tender process. Services to be procured through open tender approach and funding allocation are here up on your screen. So we've listed them out there by district, by the number of services and the LGAs, and then in the groupings you can see there. And that's our 10 services that are part of the open tender. And if we go to the next slide, thanks, Sab. These are our single invited LGA areas. So 2 in the Murrumbidgee Far West and Western, and 2 services covering the Mid-North Coast, Northern New South Wales and New England area. Thanks, Sab. If we go to the next slide. So the service model. The SHLV service model delivers intensive casework, which is long-term, needs-based and integrated with key agencies such as New South Wales Police, Health Services, Housing and relevant non-government organisations, including services delivering WDV, CAS, Women's Refuges and Safer Pathway. Successful tenderers will be offered an initial contract term of 4 years and 3 months, plus a 2-year option to extend. This is in line with the New South Wales Government commitment for funding certainty and longer contracts for our NGOs. The core services provided through Staying Home Leaving Violence is DFV case management. In addition to case management, SHLV services are contracted to also provide brokerage, case coordination, direct services to children and education activities. And you can see there the units of measure which you'd expect to see in a standard Staying Home Leaving Violence contract. If we go to the next slide, Seb. So our target groups. The target population for SHLV is women aged over 18 years who have separated from a violent partner or family member and who wish to remain in their own home or another home of their choice. The SHLV program also supports clients' children. SHLV prioritises services for women from identified target populations that are more vulnerable to DFV and who may find it more difficult to access support. This includes women and children from an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander background, women and children affected by socioeconomic disadvantage, women and children from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds, women and children affected by social exclusion, women with disability, women who are caring for a child with disability. Thanks, Sab. So now we're on to the service procurement overview, and I will pass back to Stephen.
Thanks very much, Sarah, for that overview. So look, just to reinforce the procurement objective that Sarah mentioned at the start of her piece, which was around to identify suitably qualified service providers across the LGAs across New South Wales over a 4-year period. And this may have an option to extend for another 2 years. So that is our core objective of this procurement process that we're embarking on here today. In terms of the procurement process itself, it is a single stage RFT process. And we do have 2 concurrent processes operating in concurrently, which is the open tender and the single invited tenders, as articulated earlier by Sarah. I will go through in a little bit more detail around the returnable schedules, but you'll be able to see those in section 4 on the Procurement Central platform. I guess in terms of the evaluation process, which is key to your understanding here today, we do that evaluation in a 2-step process. The first one being a conformance check. So we ensure that everyone provides all the mandatory information and meets all the eligibility criteria that has been set out in the documentation. So please read that information very carefully to ensure that your tender gets through that first gate, because if you don't meet those conformance checks, then your tender won't move into the next assessment phase. So the next stage is the evaluation assessment, which is undertaken by a tender evaluation committee. So they'll go through and assess each of the criteria, and we'll score those. And then at the conclusion of that, we'll do a value for money assessment. And I'll explain a little bit about that in the next slide. But in terms of clarifications, we may seek clarifications as we go through that evaluation process, where we'll set out a question, a time frame, and the format in which we require further information, where we may not clearly understand what you've put in your tender submission. So, okay, so there's a total of 6 criteria that are weighted and scored as part of this RFT process. So, so each of the first 4 criteria, I probably won't go through in a great deal of detail, but obviously we're looking for demonstrated experience in the various criteria. So once again, please read the question carefully and respond appropriately within the various page limits. But I will discuss in a bit more detail around criterion 5, 6, plus also the non-weighted assessment criteria, which is part of the value for money assessment. So just in terms of the budget, the annual budget, the respondents are required to provide costs for the current financial year and next financial year in the returnable schedule. So that's the key piece of information we need there. Probably quite a new requirement that a lot of people on this call today may not have seen, but it's a new requirement under the New South Wales procurement guidelines, which is around modern slavery. This particular criteria has a 5% weighting, and you need to ensure that you meet compliance with the modern slavery laws. So section 2.8 includes some of those definitions around modern slavery and the modern slavery laws. Under section 2.8.6 and 2.8.7 are 2 yes/no questions to ensure that the respondents understand and will comply with the obligations of modern slavery. Section 2.8.8, once again, is a yes/no question that asks, is your business subject to reporting requirements under the Modern Slavery Act of 2018? And if you answer yes, it means that you're a large enough entity with over $100 million annual consolidated revenue. These entities must prepare modern slavery statements that explain what the reporting entity is doing to assess and address modern slavery risks in its global operations and supply chains, and to attach this at section 2.8.9. Note that when we refer to reasonable steps, this means that steps that are reasonable in the circumstances to prevent, identify, mitigate, and remedy modern slavery In answering the tender schedule, the tenderer may refer to the New South Wales Anti-Slavery Commissioner's guidance on reasonable steps and related information and resources published by ASIC. On the counter side, if the answer is no, it means your organisation has less than 100 million annual consolidated revenue and therefore no attachment is required. So once again, it's a fairly new requirement. So make sure if you don't understand how to answer those, be sure to put questions forward, but hopefully my explanation here today helps that understanding. In terms of some of the other non-weighted but scored as part of the value for money assessment, in terms of small to medium enterprises, due to the small and specialised nature of this program, priority will be given to suppliers that are small medium enterprises. In terms of Aboriginal organisations and Aboriginal community controlled organisations, the SHLV program focuses on support for Aboriginal organisations or ACCOs. In terms of workforce proficiency, to ensure the level of service provided is appropriate for the specialised DFV service required for this program and the applicable LGAs, as well as fair payment and entitlements for staff. So we will have a close look at that. In terms of responsiveness, we'll evaluate whether the provider is integrated in their service delivery. They offer responsive solutions such as digital platforms, community outreach models, co-location, or educational programs that could provide improved outcomes whilst adhering to the program requirements. We'll also consider the provider's ability to adapt services in response to changing community needs, policy updates, or emergency situations. So that just gives you a little bit of context as to how we will consider some of these non-weighted but scored as part of the value for money assessment in the overall RFT evaluation process. So just in terms of some of the specific details of the tender opportunities, obviously you can find the details of this tender on the tender website. In terms of to locate and respond to the tender, you must register through Procurement Central, and to respond to this tender opportunity must be through that Procurement Central. It's not through emails or any other mechanism. So if you don't submit through that process, your tender won't go through the evaluation process. As we mentioned at the start, the RFT number is 1070 and it is an open tender. The release date for the tender was yesterday, Tuesday, the 8th of October. And the key date that everyone needs to keep in mind is that all tenders must be submitted by 3 p.m. on Monday, the 4th of November. So please don't leave it until the last 10 minutes to try and submit. In case you have internet issues or anything like that, please submit well in advance of that time. But another key date to remember is the last date for submitting questions to us, because you've got to give us the appropriate time to respond and for everyone to be able to hear the response back from our organisation is the 28th of October. So please get all questions in by then. And I've already mentioned about don't leave it to the last minute to submit. In terms of late submissions, as the client, we do reserve our right as to what we do with any late submissions. But as I say, don't rely on that late submission in order to get your tender assessed. So please put that through. If you do have any technical issues associated with Procurement Central, there's some contact details here, and please reach out to them because unfortunately our team doesn't control that Procurement Central website. If there are any questions or anything like that, there is a contact details here for Sarah, who we spoke earlier here today. But as I say, in terms of issuing clarifications, please issue them through the Procurement Central website. And DCJ will release all communication through the message board in Procurement Central, including any addendas and any answers to questions that every tenderer should have access to those responses. So just in regard to the tender questions and returnable schedules, there is a 2-envelope system. So there is a qualification envelope, and then there's also the technical envelope. So you do need to put those 2 separate submissions through. And the technical envelope is the one that has all the key evaluation criteria, criteria 1 through 6 that I've just gone through and explained in detail. So just to quickly revisit Procurement Central. So as I say, all responses must go through the Procurement Central website. So the website is there. We don't want tenders going through emails or any other websites. We don't want hard copies being sent through to DCJ or anything like that. So please ensure that you go into that website and ensure that it's all uploaded before 3 p.m. on Monday, the 4th of November. And then, as I say, if you do have any difficulties, there is a phone number as well as an email address where you can send those technical difficulties through to. But just note their hours of operation are Monday to Friday. So please, if you're having any issues with uploading, please work them out well in advance of that time slot. And finally, just to do an overarching summary of today's presentation. So I guess the who, eligible organisations are detailed in section 4 of the tender package overview. The what, the service providers that will be suitable for delivering the services as sort of identified by Sarah in her summary of the program. The where, the proposals must be submitted through the Procurement Central portal, and you do need to make sure that you do have an account and that's been registered. The when, the closing date is the Monday, the 4th of November, and just reiterating, questions close on the 28th of October. The why, we're looking to expand and address areas of high demand that have not been covered by previous SHLV programs. And the how is to complete the returnable schedules as per requested, such that we can evaluate those tenders in a timely manner. And the more comprehensive those submissions are and the more clarity you provide, the simpler the evaluation process. But be aware that we may ask questions through that evaluation process. So that draws us to the end of the presentation today. So want to thank everyone for your attendance today. As I say, you'll be able to see the recording of this presentation on the website, and I'd like to wish everyone luck with preparing their tenders, and we're looking forward to seeing lots of tenders to evaluate on the 4th of November. So appreciate everyone's attendance today.